Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about AWS IAM policies. Guys, what is policy? Policy is something that tells you who can do what to which resources. Who can do what to which resources. An IAM policy in AWS is a JSON document that defines permissions, specifically what actions are allowed or denied on which AWS resources. Let's discuss common uses of policies. Suppose there are 4 users. User 1, Rani, user 2, Reena, user 3, George, user 4, Vinny. And there is one cloud's AWS service, CloudWatch. Now, you want to give the access to CloudWatch to Rani and George. And you don't want to give the access to Reena and Vinny. In that case, you have to create 2 policies. One for granting access and one for restricting access. So the permission that grant the access will be attached to Rani and George, and the policy that provides the permission of restricting the access will be attached to Reena and Vinny. So first, for granting users access to specific AWS services. Second, restricting access to certain services. There are few more common uses like implementing least privilege access, like managing cross-account permissions. Now let's discuss policies. So policy number 1, allow a user to have full access on EC2. Guys, if you attach this policy to any user, then that user get the permission to perform any action on EC2. Policy number 2, allow Lambda function to access DynamoDB table. Through this policy, you give the permission of accessing DynamoDB table to Lambda function. Then policy number 3, allow users to have AWS billing dashboard access. Through this policy, you give user a permission to access billing dashboard. Now let's discuss 4th policy. Allow users to have CloudWatch full access. If you attach this policy to any user, then that user get the permission of access CloudWatch. See here, EC2, DynamoDB table, Lambda function, billing dashboard, CloudWatch, these all are different AWS services that we will study later. Now let's discuss this snippet. In this way we write the policy. Here you see version. This version is provided by AWS. Then under the statement container, the main building block of an IAM policy. Here this SID is a statement identifier. It's an optional identifier. Then 3 key elements: effect, action and resources. So effect, it can be either allow or deny, and by default it is deny. Then what is allowed, guys, or what is deny? So action is allowed or action is denied. Now what is action? So actions are the operations that you can perform on any AWS resources. For example, you want to list the items in an S3 bucket. In that case, you mention here one action, that is S3 colon list bucket. This is for listing the items in an S3 bucket. Now resources, whatever actions you mention will apply on particular resource which we mention here. And here the most important point, ARN. So ARN is Amazon resource name. Amazon resource name is a unique identifier for any AWS resource across all AWS accounts and regions. We write ARN in policies because they precisely specify which resources the policy applies to. Then last but not the least, conditions. Guys, it is completely optional. This is to control when this applies is in effect. Like here, if username is Sam, then only it will be applicable. To make it more simple, look at below screenshot. Here we have three key elements: effect, action and resource. So here you see effect is allow. So allow, what action is allowed? This action is allowed, S3 colon list bucket. On which resource? So on this resource, resource is S3 and the name of that resource is example underscore bucket. So how we read this? We read this allow action S3 colon list bucket on resource S3 of name example underscore bucket. Let's take one more example. It is for denying all actions on all resources. Guys, if you attach this policy to any user, then that user cannot be able to perform any action on any resources. Like here you see this asterisk indicates all actions. And if we write this asterisk under resource, it means all resources. It indicates all resources. So here how we read this? Deny all actions on all resources. Now allowing multiple actions on single resources. Suppose you want to allow multiple actions on single resource, then you create such type of policy. Like here, this policy says allow get object from S3 and put object on S3, and the name of that S3 resource is example underscore bucket. So before hands-on, let us analyze example of multiple statement in a single policy. Here you see it is having two permission statements. This is 1 and this is 2 included in the same policy. Now it enables all DynamoDB actions on two tables which are located in different regions. One is in US East 1 and second is in US East 2, and both belongs to the same AWS account. Here you see 856900 988867, 856900 988867. Now let's talk about policies and users with a simple example. Now as we know, IAM users are identities. So when you create an IAM user, they can't access anything in your account. It means they cannot access any service, any resources until and unless you attach policies to them. And the policy that you attach to the user is identity based policy. Now in this example, this is an example of identity based policy. This policy allows the user to perform all DynamoDB actions on the table called student in the account 334232267843, and the region is US East 1. Guys, now let's talk about different types of policies. Before I tell you about the different types of policy, let me tell you about what is IAM policy. So access in AWS is managed by policies when attaching them to identities. Identities will be your user, your group of users or roles. Now most policies are stored in AWS in the form of JSON document. Now policy defines the permission of the user. See, if you want to provide any permission to any user, then you write under the policy. You attach the policy and that policy is JSON document, and in that document the permissions are written. Now let's talk about types of policies one should aware of. See, basically policies are divided into two. First is your managed policies and second is your inline policies. Then managed policy is divided into two. One is your AWS managed policy, second is your customer managed policies. Let's discuss about different types of policies. So first is identity based policy. So use the identity based policy to control the access of identities that we already know. So and here identities means your user, your group of users and roles. So finally there are two types of identity based policies. First is your managed policy and second is inline policy. Then as I told you, managed policy is further divided into two. First AWS managed, second customer managed. AWS managed, as its name indicates, these identities based policies are created and controlled by AWS itself. And customer managed, so managed policies that you create and manage in your AWS account. So customer managed policy provides more control than AWS managed policies, because guys, these policies are created by users. That's why they have more control. Now next is inline policy. Policies that are directly added to a single user or a group or role is called inline policy. This policy maintains a strict one-to-one relationship between a policy and an identity. Now here identity can be a user, it can be a group of users, or it can be a single role. Now they are deleted when you delete the identity. Suppose you created a group and you attach any inline policy to that group, and once you delete that group, then this policy, inline policy, will automatically get deleted. So guys, this is all about AWS IAM policies and their types, and in next session we will do the hands-on on these policies. Till then, bye bye. Thank you.